We welcome back Alexei Levene, co-founder of Desolenator. Desolenator developed a 100% carbon-positive water desalination system, which a company called Silal have trialled in Abu Dhabi. Silal is a government-owned company in the UAE whose mission is to drive food security in the region. Now, if you think about food security in dry climates anywhere, the two main limitations are water and energy. I had the pleasure of talking to Alexei recently, and here he is talking about the context in the UAE, the customer, what Desolinator did there, and how they worked with the Trial Reservoir.
Of course, as an economy, whilst we had COP28 last year hosted in Dubai, there's a massive push on decarbonisation. But nevertheless, in the region, the UAE is a big driver of fossil fuels, a big user, I can say, of fossil fuels. So if we just go into a little bit more of a lens on the specific challenge of our customer and thinking about how to build this kind of food secure capacity in the UAE. Today, they've got something like 38,000 farms across the UAE and around 24,000 in Abu Dhabi area. Now, for the most part, these are not optimized farms. So you can imagine if you've got an open field and you're putting water down, it's going to evaporate. It's not an efficient way of getting it to the plant. How are you cooling? There's a lot of opportunity to improve the operations at a farm level across the UAE. So there's one aspect, and then of course there's adding new capacity as well. So Silal are looking at both avenues. This is our flagship product. It's called the SP40. That's Steampunk 40. Produces 40 cubic meters per hour of ultra pure water, which we can also remineralize. We're entirely powered by renewable energy, but we can also tap local waste heat sources. So this is a thermal technology. We do love any waste heat that may be available, whether it's from generators or refrigeration or from industrial processes. But we can be off-grid and run a flat desalination plant entirely from our solar photovoltaic thermal panels that we developed. We are pretty much, because it's a thermal system, we're pretty much input water agnostic. That means that we can take seawater, salty groundwater. We're now looking at high salinity produce water, and it's the same system that we're using. So pretty robust, and we're looking at a whole range of water inputs. We're also optimized for zero liquid discharge. Now, this is becoming an increasing buzzword, I would say, in the water space. That means taking our waste brine and going all the way through to a solid salt, if we're taking seawater. We are incredibly well optimized for zero liquid discharge. We don't use any harmful chemicals in this process. We can recirculate our brine, concentrate it from solar, and that means that the cost of us to do zero liquid discharge is relatively pretty low. So here's a little bit about our customer, Silal. As I mentioned, they are a wholly owned subsidiary of ADQ, which is famously the $1 trillion fund, government sovereign wealth fund out of the UAE, run by Sheikh Tanun. And Silal is wholly owned, and as I said, their singular mission is around achieving food security for the UAE. Good news, our plant is already up and running. In fact, we completed the handover of this plant about 3 months ago now, and with a very happy customer. The use case in this case is that we're actually providing water for growing tomatoes in the desert. And I can say to anyone who hasn't experienced this, eating a tomato in the desert from salty groundwater, it very often creates light bulb moments, just like, wow, how is this possible? And we make really good tomatoes, it turns out. So I always love visiting our plant and coming away with a new batch. In this case, we're taking salty groundwater. This is brackish water. It's at around sort of a third of the concentration of the seawater in the area. And we're doing the primary use for this is that we're taking that water and we're cleaning it, we're recovering it, and making it ready for irrigation into the farm. But we're not just limited to that. We actually have a couple of other areas that we're adding value in this process as well, which I'll touch on shortly. So this is a 25 cubic meter a day plant. This is still, I would say, a stepping stone on our journey to having a fully bankable solution, which is why the Trial Reservoir program makes so much sense. And I'll come back to that in a minute as well. So I'm just going to show you some shots of the plant. This is actually pre-completion. This was around COP28, where you can see quite dramatic sort of photos. Some of our team that we have on site, Jensen, Abu, Michael, Satish, and Mohammed. This is a shot from on top of our MED vessels, where you can actually see the greenhouses that we're providing the water for. And this is I mentioned about the digital twin. This is part of the work that we're doing. So actually, normally you do a digital twin first and then build the plant. In this case, we built the plant and then made the digital twin. But it's really interesting in terms of how we can, for example, mark different parts, start to measure their performance. And here you see some visitors we had and some wonderful tomatoes that they're enjoying there as well. So I mentioned about some of the other benefits beyond water. Of course, providing the water for irrigation is critical. But in a place like the UAE, the energy that's required for cooling is very significant, because you can imagine, especially in summer, these greenhouses get incredibly hot. Now, today, mostly the approach is to use water for cooling, so spraying in water and using that condensation as a cooling mechanism. And in fact, there's maybe 3 or 4 times more water used for cooling than there is for growing, which is quite staggering, really. So we're experimenting. We're currently into an R&D phase with this, but we're experimenting because we're a thermal technology and we have a heat pump that actually we can provide cool water into the greenhouse. And we're now experimenting where to apply that cool water. And just to summarize on this slide, that this is a net zero project. We designed it, even though we are tied to the grid here, we've added a bunch of solar to achieve a net zero plant. As I'm personally a serial entrepreneur now. This is my 6th venture, and I can say that doing the kind of industrial green hardware that actually we need to course correct our planet is incredibly difficult, especially when you're going from an idea to a bankable product, or what's now called FOAK, I think, first of a kind, right, technology. It's incredibly difficult because there isn't really a funding or innovation funding when you're going on that journey. It doesn't really exist. It's incredibly difficult. For a solution like Desolenator, everyone's interested, but who actually wants to go and be first? That tends to be very rare. So a lot of our work is to find, the real pioneers in the world who say, yeah, look, we know that you maybe don't have all the answers, but you know what? We see what you've done and we'll figure it out together. So Trial Reservoir fills a really important hurdle in bridging that gap, I can say, with first customers or with early stage customers, where not only can to kind of help identify who are the real pioneers, but also to say, look, this is a way to de-risk your journey, right? We're going to help to de-risk that journey. So incredibly valuable. And then of course with it, we're deploying a project. So we've got materials coming to site, we've got subcontractors, we've got orders going out the door. I mean, it's a complex process, so having some working capital through that process is actually pretty helpful in the right moment.
Alexei, thank you for coming back to tell us what the final outcomes were. What an amazing result. Just to recap, because who doesn't love some numbers, Desolinator's SP40 is the Emirates' first 100% circular solar thermal desalination plant at scale, and it's carbon positive. The trial hit every single one of its performance metrics: water output, water quality, power production, and carbon savings. This is huge news. So if you want to find out more, here's Desolinator's website.